Let's dive into First Key and AMH and what you learned there.
The biggest thing I learned is scale doesn't create the problem, that scale exposes problem. They taught me that these little cracks in the process are very little at 10 homes you're buying a month. But when you're buying 1,000 in a month, those cracks are the Grand Canyon.
Our guest is Killian, president of RENU Management, a fully centralized operations platform purpose-built for institutional SFR and BTR portfolios.
Is it clear what you're supposed to do? If it's not clear, you can't be expected to actually accomplish a task. Those little things have shaped the way I have led teams. It taught me a lot about being uncomfortable, continuing to push in and lean into problems that maybe some others are running in the other direction. Those that stand out are the ones that will go right to that problem, like the buffalo through the storm. Don't run around, don't run backwards, go straight through it, and you'll be through that storm faster than if you ran backwards.
Best advice you've ever received?
I'm going to give you two. Early mentor told me to listen more. Another one, when you are building this out, I want you to build a system that is so good that even
Welcome back to Inside the Vendor Network, an Everresi original series where we spotlight the operators, platforms, and partners shaping how the SFR and BTR industry actually works. This episode is brought to you by Palisade Wall Panel and Tile Systems. Palisade designs grout-free, waterproof wall panel systems that help operators build and renovate and deliver durable, high-performance spaces without the performance headaches of tile. So without the maintenance headaches, we are built for efficiency, longevity, and real-world performance. So today's conversation matters because property management is no longer a back-office function. It directly drives NOI, resident experience, and long-term portfolio performance, starting as early as acquisition. Today, our guest is Killian. Killian is president of RENU Management, a fully centralized operations platform purpose-built for institutional SFR and BTR portfolios. Ryan has operated inside some of the largest platforms in the country, including AMH, First Key Homes, where he worked across acquisitions, construction, maintenance, operations at scale. Today at RENU, Ryan leads a centralized operating model designed to surface and capture as much as 20% of NOI. Many owners don't even realize they're leaving that on the table. You don't know what you don't know. But before we talk platforms, performance, or numbers, I want people to understand always who our guests are and who really Ryan is. Because how someone builds systems is always shaped by how they think, how they lead, and what they've learned the hard way. Ryan, I'm really glad you're here today. Let's get inside the vendor network.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'm really excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity. I'm a big fan of what you're doing here.
Thank you. It's a labor of love for sure. So before institutional portfolios and before platforms, before leadership and all the titles, I really like to take a minute at the beginning of every episode and just get the guests to get to know you. Your face is very popular on the conference scene and within the industry. You've been around for quite some time, but let's take a few minutes and let's get to know you as a person. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. I think I'm part of a blended family growing up as a kid with 6 kids, again, blended. So I think what maybe is most transferable to kind of how I live my life today and how I operate professionally is the accountability and dependency as a team that kind of ingrained in me as a young kid and, as an adolescent. When you're a part of an 8-person family in a household, and you're expected to do something, how you say you're going to do something, it sure better be done. Otherwise, many dominoes fall in a bad direction, right? And if you don't have it done, you should have a reason why it's not done and potentially even the solution to how you're going to get it done. So I think early on, before I even knew that was being, placed into my subconscious as an operating system, that's kind of what happened, right? As a kid, I, certainly, middle-class family, but when I wanted extras, there was a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of hands out. So, I very early on, 12 years old, had my first job bussing tables at a diner and And then another job delivering or, selling a local newspaper door to door at apartment buildings. I mean, just various odd jobs anywhere I could get somebody to give me a paycheck.
Where from?
I'm from the Northeast, originally Philadelphia area, and grew up in South Jersey.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was it taught me a lot about working in that team environment. I was second oldest, so there was some responsibility that comes with that.
Sure.
And really, I think just understanding that for us to all do well, for me to do well, the ecosystem had to be right, and it had to. Everybody had to know exactly what their role was in a situation or a year or on a vacation, for crying out loud, right? I have two kids, so I can't imagine having six of them running around and figuring that all out. But
I don't know if our parents did it. Like, especially with all the technology and everything we have today. But 8 kids, oh my gosh, bless your mom and your dad.
tell me about it. Yeah. So, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. But I think really, what again, as the time went on, right? I remember thinking back to my childhood and realizing, like, how did my parents do that? And thinking about how that might take me into leadership roles as as a young professional and then going forward. And, reflecting upon it, both for this and just over time in life, it's mostly about clarity, right? What are you, what are you expected to do? Is that clear? Is it clear what you're supposed to do? If it's not clear, you can't be expected to actually accomplish a task, right? So I think, again, those little things have just stuck with me over time. I have been a part of a team, so the way I have led teams. And, also, I think there's the other piece of it is that my parents were good servant leaders is probably the buzzword that I would throw out there. But, they knew that they needed their children's help to get through a day. So they asked what they could do to help support what we'd been asked to do, right? How can I help you do what you have to do? Yes, I'm the boss, but I've got to, I work for you right now. Tell me what you need.
Sure.
I think those principles kind of stuck with me and really shaped who I am today.
Yeah, I think leadership, you want to see naturally with your children, you want to see them succeed. And I think that's something I carried into my leadership is I really wanted to see, I've always wanted to see anyone on a team, whether was in sports. I wanted us all to win together. Um, six kids in a family, that team is larger than most startups someday, right? It's totally, and as a startup, you usually start out with a thought leader and a couple people who can do some heavy lifting, and you've got one visionary, and you kind of morph into your roles. And then as businesses develop, you know, strengths are identified, weaknesses are identified, and then you each kind of form your lanes and where the value impacts the business. But I think that's so right in any family as well. And as we grow, we mature, those things change too, and we change as people, and we start to play different roles. So you said you have 2 kids. Tell us a little bit about them.
They are my purpose, my why, all those things. They keep me grounded. They keep me sane. Sometimes they make me a little insane, which leads back to the sanity in this vicious cycle. But they are, it's what I get. They're 8 and 6, so very fun age. We get sports, and it's my daughter is the oldest, and my son is a 6-year-old. Both amazing, both vastly different. And they keep us on our toes, my wife and I, but they are just a joy and so much fun to be around. And like you, as we had kind of talked before, I'm a bit of a workaholic, but they have found a way to shift my thinking there to make sure that I create some balance so that I can
Sure.
be present, be with them, whether it's coaching their, basketball team or being at a school event or just making sure I have enough quiet time to, be with them for an hour before bedtime, reading stories or whatever it is. It's a big part of like who I am as a person. And, I shudder to think what I would be like if I didn't have my 2 little ones.
Yeah, I think the drive comes from I'm also a big giver. And I like to give. And I think that's where I love what I do, so I never feel like I'm doing work, right? And I think when you in your career find something that you love to do, and it doesn't feel like work, you like to do it, you want to do more of it. But then you have kids and you're like, wow, this is really an amazing experience. Mine is 21. He is working to be a pilot. So to think from going from being a baby to now he's flying airplanes. Um, Again, it just shows the power of like, yeah, think about your 6-year-old right now flying airplanes.
How do you do that?
Yeah, and it's scary. And I think that's another part of big leadership, right? And it actually kind of is a good segue into the next session and how you ended up at RENU and kind of talking about your background is um at some point in your life, someone gave you an opportunity and you take it, even when you're not ready sometimes. Um, and then as a leader, we give opportunities sometimes to others when maybe they're not fully ready or they don't think they're fully ready. And it's not about being ready, it's about digging in and kind of doing the work. So you didn't start your career inside institutional real estate. You started closer to the ground in brokerage. Um, what did that phase of your career teach you that still shows up in how you're operating today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot that I took from brokerage in general. Obviously, the basics of understanding the underlying value of real estate, land, the actual improved asset, market dynamics, relationships. But mostly, I think if I had to try to put it into kind of one bucket, I would say that when you're in that type of a business, right, brokerage, where it's that eat what you kill environment, right? You're on the hunt, and if you're not good at hunting, you're not going to eat, right? So in that environment, you're forced to learn quickly what are the skills you need to actually make the kill, right? So that you can have dinner, and what values do you have to have to be able to be effective. For me, it was a couple of things, right? Subject matter expertise. Do I know what I'm talking about? And if I don't, I'll learn really quick, right? And beyond that, over communication. When you're working for somebody on the brokerage side, anybody who's watching this that has been on the brokerage side knows if you're not communicating well, whether it's good or bad news, you're going to lose out in the end. And then, doing what you say you're going to do, right? When you're over communicating and saying, here's what I'm going to do for you, get it done. Back to my, some of those principles that I kind of learned as a kid. Know what you're talking about. And if you identify a hole in your subject matter expertise, seek to fill that hole as fast as possible. And then over communicate and follow up and do what you say you're going to do. I think those are table stakes for brokerage. I learned and honed those three things through many failures, just like anybody else who's been in brokerage, walking into too many meetings, thinking I knew I was prepared and didn't have answers to questions I needed. And that gave me data or feedback on, okay, now the next meeting I go in.
Next time I'm going to have this.
Exactly right. And I think it goes back to what you just said about, we're never ready, right? Whether it's leadership or doing a podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that my parents instilled in me as a small kid was there was this book called, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff.
Yeah.
And everything's small stuff. And I thought, is everything really small stuff? And like 99% of the stuff is small stuff, right? So don't sweat it. Try not to look too far into the future or too far backward. Be very present and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Just go, do it. You're going to the worst thing that happens is you'll fail, identify a mistake that you made, and then you be better off for the next time. So I really took that approach in brokerage, and that can be frustrating. And some people are on that cycle for too long and decide, I'm not going to break through. And the rest are find a way to push through that discomfort, to push through that pain, and to push through whatever ego doesn't like to hear that you don't know what you're talking about at a meeting, so that you can have that feedback and be
right
for the next one.
So I think that you said two key things there, and it reminded me of. So I've had a lot of coaches. I was an athlete early on. I played softball. I was first team all league for New York State. And so I had a really good coach. I've had great business coaches and mentors. And when we really started to scale at my last job, I hired a scaling up coach. There's a book out there by Vern Harnish called Scaling Up, and it's a second book after called The Rockefeller Habits. And there's a saying in there, my scaling up coach used to always say this to me and my team. We would meet on a cadence, and we'd start some of our meetings with, sayings, and he would start his all the time. And it sticks with me. And I hope I nail it here, but it's, we underestimate or we overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we underestimate what we can do in the long term. And when he first said it in the first meeting, I'm like, what? What is it? I'm so confused by that. Like, what does that even mean? And as I really started to unpackage that and I would talk to him about it, it's, today, right? Today's Friday, we all have our to-do list to get stuff done. And we have this, if you care about what you do and you have work ethic and you want to be the person that you're talking about, Ryan, and that's do what you say you're going to do, you're going to swing and miss sometimes. You're going to have this list, and the list is crammed into this time frame where you've blocked out saying, I'm going to get all this stuff done. But then that time frame comes and your list isn't complete and you don't complete everything on that day. And if you're anything like me, how I feel about that is I failed. This is my internal monologue. I failed. I didn't get it done. But somewhere in your career, you're like, it's okay. But communicate, right? So it's not about not getting something done. It's about communication and then follow through. And I think we do this. We overestimate what we can get done today. And often we forget about what small things over long periods of time do in massive action. And that's really about scaling and what you guys do at RENU Property Management, right? And the small things. And so kind of let's get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly with everything you just said. And again, the finding, understanding where you overshot, and it's okay, right? It's okay to have that failure, to fail kind of beautifully in that situation.
Sure.
Important thing is what you do next. What does the email look like, or the conversation look like to whoever you made those promises to, and how do you position what you missed, why you missed it, and what you're going to do about it. And then what's the timeline to actually get those things done, right? At the end of the day, that solves basically every one of those problems. Further, that failure or, that miss or that overreach because you overestimated what you could do in a short time is more data. Next time, I won't do this way. I'll make sure I put more appropriate timelines on this. And it's a constant, this is just like operational efficiency. It is a never-ending endeavor. You are never 100% operationally efficient. Anybody who says they have reached that pinnacle is fooling themselves.
They're lying.
Well, because you've got to...
Themselves.
Yeah, it's a never-ending process. And, more feedback and figuring out how to position and find that right balance between being a go-getter and an overachiever and adding value to a client or a customer, but also staying within yourself. And in reality, it's a never-ending line that's always shifting based on your skill set, the scenario, who you're talking to, what the topic is. It's, so I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And the power of no, when you start to recognize, I saw a post this morning, Todd Thorpe, he was a former guest on the show. He works for a wireless networking system. They put in wireless internet in multifamily, primarily multifamily, some BTR communities. And he made a post this morning saying, I said no. The property just wanted to put some equipment in some hallways. Eventually, that would have driven more phone calls into the property management team, complaints about wireless, lagging, and it would have driven a bad resident experience. And then ultimately, his product probably would have gotten pointed at. So the power of no is really, really important as well. So I think, and you learn that by overextending yourself and not saying no. And you end up ultimately failing. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about market truth, because I think this is a good segue, and accountability. You know, learning market truth quickly and negotiating and pricing discipline. When you were at, I mean, you were at First Key, you were at AMH. Those are big owner operators where you saw vast, massive portfolios. During a time where, I mean, let's face it, it was a land grab and it was drinking from a fire hydrant. And at the end of the day, it was like, get the job done. And we didn't have as much protocols and procedures. And those were the moments we were putting those things in place, or starting to put these things into place out of discovery, out of failures, out of doing the things wrong. So your experience and your knowledge is footed in failure in some areas, but success in recovering and identifying data and using data. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you left brokerage, you moved into institutional leadership roles, scale that changed everything for you. So what did operating at that level teach you about where portfolios actually succeed? And, there's the quiet failures sometimes nobody sees.
Yeah. You're right. All the lessons we just talked about and more were at play and needed in that environment. If I, think back to the people, that the guy who hired me, Zach Johnson, who's still at American Homes for Brand, this is 2012. So it's early days, right? And the rest of the team around us, Brian Smith and all these other folks, we had a great team. We had a great team that exhibited all those traits that we just talked about and more. And, there was fear of the unknown. There was fear of, are we deploying this capital the right way? Of course, like any sane human would have. But we also had a great mix of people who had because this is a new, burgeoning space, right?
Yeah, it absolutely still is in a sense.
It still is. I mean, but it was the definition of building the plane during takeoff, right? So it was important to have mechanisms in place that allowed you to get better, right? Like tight feedback loops. I mean, back in the days when I first started, again, comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't know how I'm going to do with, $50 million in cashier's checks in my name at an auction this month after I personally underwrote these. And while, again, having a background in real estate obviously helps all of that, but sheesh, this is a big responsibility. I hadn't done a $50 million transaction at that point, right? So being able to leverage, some of the innate kind of skills and principles that shaped me to that point, plus the team around us, and then mechanisms like a very tight feedback loop allowed us to scale quickly during that, gold rush land grab, right? When, I remember having conversations about how did Invitation do today? Because we were the big two at the time, right? Did we win? Did we get more homes than them? And, trying to decide, okay, if we didn't get more than them, is that actually a bad thing? Maybe we showed some restraint that we needed to. Again, we'll see how the renovation goes. Did we underwrite it properly? At that time, obviously the systems and tools and knowledge was far inferior. Right? I mean, we've got all kinds of automated systems and integrations and AI tools that help us get smarter. And back then it was Excel spreadsheets, grunt work, and blood, sweat, and tears.
So we're in the vendor network. So let's even recognize the fact that a lot of the trades, right? Like my background was in flooring. So at this time as a vendor, we had Main Street Renewal come into town. Barry Lindahl, who's now the founder of Sibby, gave us our first job, SFR job ever. And my business development person went out, met him. I think, Barry, known for his flip-flops, was on a job site wearing flip-flops. And Daniel comes back from the sales meeting. I'm new in the space too. My background was in marketing. And Daniel's like, they said they're going to start buying like 50 to 100 houses a month. And I'm like, is this a Ponzi scheme? Like, what's going on? This is weird. We were a mom and pop in Charlotte, North Carolina, does retail work. And I was like, run a credit app. That was my response. I'm like, run a credit app. Let's see where this goes. Okay. But you start to think, even as a vendor at that point, it's like, okay, 50 to 100 homes, I'm going to have to 5X my inventory.
Yeah.
Boom, capital.
Yep.
My scheduling person's I'm going to need another scheduling person. All of a sudden, you start to scale, but you may not have been in a position with the capital, even as small plumbers, just the basic painters, drywall, the stuff to just get these homes turned and like rented and turned into a leased environment. We were all learning together. It was quite fun in hindsight, but during the moments, you are purely operate. I'll speak for myself. I was purely operating off of gut instinct and a drive to succeed, while painting vision to your team. Let's go, right? So you naturally start to get different players on your team. You've got the visionary on your team who's, keep during those down moments, keeping everyone's heads up and being like, hey, let's keep our eye on the prize. Let's stay focused. This is where we're at. Tight feedback loops, so dire.
Yeah, and to your point, you can't do it all yourself because there's so much.
Right?
So those principles that we already talked about, right? Like okay, here's the team. Here's what we're doing. Here's what you're responsible for. You're responsible for. Now go out and get it done. What can I do to help you? What do you need anything? Put your plan together. Come back to me.
And if you're failing.
We can solve problems. We can resource things, but have to know what you need, right? So you're right. I mean, I could talk for a 3-hour but experience. And I think what it really showed me though, and is, it was a scale that at that time I had not yet seen. Right.
Yep.
And
Huge experience. And so let's dive into First Key and AMH and what you learned there.
yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned is that scale doesn't create the problem. That scale exposes problems, right? The problems are existing. We had, and again, compared to today, we had less information than we would have liked, right? At the pie. So we did our best to gather information, but you could start to see where exactly, like what pieces of information ultimately, as the feedback loop kept coming back month after month or week after week, or quarter after quarter, and you would see how a certain buy based on an assumption that you made was incorrect, off base, and you were able to use that data and go back and get better, right? But again, it taught me that, that these little cracks in the process are very little at 10 homes you're buying a month. But when you're buying 1,000 in a month, those cracks are the Grand Canyon. Yeah, they need to address quickly. So,
Problem at scale as well.
absolutely. And they're like dead bodies. They don't smell better with time. They smell worse. It's bigger problems. So I think, again, we had a great team. I learned a lot around how to go right to the point of friction, right? Don't bury your head in the sand and focus on, the main thing. Go back, go directly to the point of friction. And as I, continued to jump up from a leadership perspective and have more people report to me and take over different projects, as we were building the whole company, not just acquisitions, right? We were building everything at the same time. So as I would poke my head into various areas that I didn't know a whole lot about at the time, again, first come in with a servant leadership mindset. How can I help today? What if I could change anything today to help you get better, perform better, hit these metrics better? What would it be? Tell me. I don't know if I can get it done, but let's all be aware of where the problems are.
Sure.
And then how can I help you? How can I help you get better? Educate me, teach me, and I will help make things better for you, or I will certainly endeavor to do so. So I think it taught me a lot about, being uncomfortable, continuing to push in and lean into problems that, maybe some others are running in the other direction. Those that stand out are the ones that will go right to that problem, like the buffalo through the storm, right? Don't run around, don't run backwards, go straight through it, and you'll be through that storm faster than if you ran backwards.
Yeah. So, I think that I think what we all kind of learned, just as a flooring vendor, was life cycle thinking. And we went through the life cycle, right? We began in the industry. It was acquisition, speed, turn it to a rental. Then they became occupied. Then we started having turns. And this all became, you started to identify the life cycle of an asset. So as a flooring vendor, for example, we would go in, measure a floor, and our estimator lens was to look at a floor and say, oh yeah, that's a total demo. But that's not always the case in an asset that the floor is still performing. It's not, aesthetically necessarily pleasing, but we're making business decisions, not aesthetic decisions. Making sure that the house was clean, safe, and functional, of course, and that the resident experience wasn't impacted. But we weren't top of mind resident experience right at those moments either. Those were things that were also learned. And it wasn't because we didn't care about the resident experience. It's because we hadn't experienced what a poor resident experience looked like. Right. And so then we're like, oh, hey, sure, just, cut this floor back, throw in a transition. Well, that transition just becomes a callback because every transition fails. So, or go with carpet, don't replace the pad. Well, the pad actually extends the life of the carpet. So, learning those things, knowing those things, and that's in flooring. But you're a property management company. You had every aspect. I just had flooring. I could stay laser focused on one trade. There are thousands of little weepholes.
Yep, absolutely.
And those are the areas where granularly your team's experience comes to the table. And you start to uncover the bodies. You start to sniff out the bodies. And do you find that when you take over a property, that the owner of those properties or, a portfolio, when you take that over, that they suspected and were somewhat aware, but don't understand the impact, the larger impact that was really happening, or how one thing was impacting another thing. And you could eliminate things by solving one thing, and the compounding factor, I think, is what I've learned by talking to you and Natalie and some of the people on your team preparing even for the show. I was like, wow, 20% NOI, that sounds aggressive in a market where we're all squeezing everything, or we think we are.
Yep.
Right? So talk a bit about your approach of taking all this experience of scale. Well, actually, before we do that, let's talk about how did you transition out of the owner operator and then end up at RENU? And then we'll get into a little more about RENU.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, it was a great run at American Homes for Rent. I learned so much, had so much fun, and learned about all the things we just discussed. And then First Key wanted to get in the game, and in 2017, and they were starting at the starting line when American Homes for Rent had already built up to 50,000 homes. An invitation, I think, at the time was around 60. So they had dreams of being in that top tier, but they had to start from zero, right? So they had some great meetings with their ownership group, Cerberus, and then with the team there at First Key, and some great people to kind of kick things off. But they needed somebody who had seen the building of a platform specific to the way I sort of had witnessed at American Homes and participate in. And but they didn't have the blessing of the real estate market where it was when we started buying at AMH, right? Again, it was a great team. We made great choices, built a great portfolio. The fundamentals were solid, but the buying 25 cents on the dollar for peak values covers up a lot of mistakes.
Sure.
And allowed us that time to build the plane while it was in the air, because you got such a value on the underlying real estate. In 2017, if you remember, things were on recovery. They were not far away from '07 values at that point. And while HPA was still projected, and now looking backwards, it turned out to be true. It continued to grow through COVID, right? And then, we were, you obviously had to be much more careful. There was not, you didn't have the margin for error that you had in 2011 and 12 and 13. So I took a lot of the lessons I learned. I was able to instantly convey the importance of them, and then help with, great resources around me at First Key, build teams that focused on identifying those, rooting out those bodies. And, you mentioned how things compound over time, right? Atomic Habits is one of the power.
It's actually on my bookshelf.
Yeah. Think about just do something the same way every day and measure it for 90 days and see how you feel. Whether that's with health or fitness or diet or whatever, or work, right? It's the same principles. So we had a great run there, and then COVID obviously came, and our entire business changed and flipped, and we were all getting used to remote work. It was during this time, towards the end of 2020, that things were, the capital around the space realized there was another opportunity to get in because of the fundamentals being what they were, specifically rent just continuing to go through the Travis, my current partner, Travis Bonwell, the CEO and founder of RENU.
We love Travis at Everresi Media.
Yeah, he's the best. So he and I had done some work together while I was at First Key. He was a buyer for us actually when we first started before we internalized the team. So we had a long working relationship and friendship. And he's, hey, look, I've got a couple of capital groups that now want to leverage RENU to buy more homes, because that's really how RENU started, was as an acquirer of real estate. We didn't start with this massive PM platform. He was managing like 1,000 primarily organics, mom and pop type owners.
Mm.
His primary part of his business was identifying, underwriting, contracting, and then managing the transactions of one by one real estate for institutional SFR owners. So he had got a couple of capital groups that wanted him to go fast. I mean, we're talking 2012 fast. He said, hey, Ryan, I'd love to have you come in and partner with me on this and help me build the operating platform, using all of the skills that you learned at First Key and AMH. And that phone call, I'll never forget it. I mean, it would change my life.
These stories.
Yeah, I couldn't have been more excited about. I mean, I instantly, when you have one of those interactions, and you have like that body yes, like your body starts to, like, I don't know what the right.
You start to move toward it.
Yeah, it's just like you're leaning in, and there's like a little spine tingle, and maybe the hair on your arm stand up, and you're like, this feels right. I don't even know full step is, but just hearing the first couple of sentences, this feels right. And obviously we went through a decent courtship process to figure out what it looked like, and if it was, and my initial reactions turned out to be 100% accurate. And
Well, you had a very stable,
extremely, yeah,
corporate, benefits. The AMH and First Key, they take good care of their employees. They're good employers. You're surrounded by big teams, and you almost in a sense are like, okay, you're not taking a step backwards. You're taking a step though in a different direction. And now you're coming out of an environment where you're growing because you're not the smartest one in the room, right? You're surrounded by like really intelligent people. And then when you go into from large ponds to smaller ponds, your experience tends to shine a little bit brighter in those. You can swim maybe a little faster in that pond. But so that can be scary because I like to stay in environments where I'm not the top dog. Because when I'm the top dog, or I think I know what I know, or I'm one of the 5%ers even, I'd rather be the 10 or 15%er because I'm learning from those 1%ers, 2%ers, and I thrive in those environments because I watch myself change in those environments. So going into a smaller environment where now you're leading it, people are turning to you for that expertise. And in this case, you are being hired specifically to say, hey, what'd you learn here? Come apply it. You're the man. Come help us build this thing. There's a lot of pressure. That's scary. That's fearful. And to a lot as an owner, you're probably looking at taking a step backwards in income. These are real life decisions that you're making. It sounds like you're starting a family.
just had my first that year, or sorry, I had my wife was pregnant with our second major decision. And
Yeah, you go down on my own.
yeah, no, it was, again, I felt it before I knew all the details. So, and I have learned over the years to really hone and trust my internal kind of gut, for lack of a better word. And I knew immediately, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and that means I need to craft a way where it makes sense because the opportunity is too great. And back to all the other things we talked about, I am comfortable being uncomfortable and throwing myself into those situations, and taking calculated risks, because I believe you've got to risk it to get the biscuit, right?
That's right.
So, obviously, with long conversations with my wife and other mentors that I cared a lot about, and it obviously helped that I had a existing friendship with Travis and trusted him implicitly and still do.
Sure.
And also, back to just circling this back to kind of real estate fundamentals, what I knew I had here was an opportunity with somebody who has bought, $5 billion in assets, right? On behalf of institutional capital, not his own, Travis.
Yeah, he wasn't a noob.
Right. He was used to the pressure cooker that comes with, you bought it, you underwrote it, you told me I could rent it for this, you told me I could maintain it for this. And I knew that the system, because we had leveraged it at First Key, was sound. fundamentally. So I knew that whoever this capital partner, which at the time I didn't yet know, I knew that they were going to be pleased with what the product that they got from RENU in terms of underwriting, identifying, and then being accountable for that underwrite. Because at the end of the day, while we have a reputation today for kind of taking over portfolios that are or sites that are struggling, previous managers are struggling for whatever reason, really that we started by identifying and acquiring the asset and being responsible financially for the performance of those assets. So talk about a feedback loop, right? You didn't hit your NOI that you told me you'd hit, so you don't get, you only get X instead of Y, right? Those are the types of accountability feedback loops that we had at RENU in the early days, in my early days of RENU, that continued to allow us, while I was building the operational platform, to utilize feedback to identify the cracks, right? Identify and better inform underwrites. So it goes back and forth all the way around. And again, atomic habits, okay, this is how we're going to deliver a superior maintenance experience, both to the resident as well as the owner. That's your ultimate have your cake or eat it too, right? It's very hard to spend what the owner wants to spend and was in their budget and make the residents as happy as possible. Very hard to do that. And I personally have always said, you can have your cake and eat it too, but the small things have to get done right. Right? The little things, those atomic habits that compound over time. And when you identify a problem, do not ignore it. Go after that problem, root it out, figure out if this is something that you have to accommodate for, and then how do you do that? Or if it's something that you could fundamentally change, and then come up with and use your team who are very, who I am lucky to be surrounded by tremendous operators at RENU and in past lives that, once the path is cleared and the space is made for them to solve, with I hope some good guidance here and there, but largely to just get out of their way, let them solve it.
100%. So I think it was my third or fourth episode. I had Andy Wu. With Resi. He was formerly with Resi Belt and now is with Arc Homes for Rent. And, in his early 20s, he was given an opportunity to deploy billions of dollars in capital because of timing. And so the value that he has today, I'm bringing this up because experience is super key. Right? So with your experience, it's easy to say and put on a resume, I'm experienced, or I have 20 plus years of experience. And sometimes I don't think we stop long enough to understand the difference between someone with experience and the different levels of experience. Someone that's been in the industry as long as you have and Travis has, you're talking about billions of dollars of capital deployed. One of the things Andy said on his episode too was, Jay Bice used to always say this to him as he was being mentored. I asked him what was the biggest thing is, you can write the best deal. You can underwrite it. But maintenance of that property can ruin the best underwritten deal in the planet and vice versa. So you can actually take a bad deal and it can turn into a good deal as well with the proper strategy from a property management standpoint. So there's companies out there that will just focus on acquisition, help you buy a portfolio, and then you turn that portfolio over to your property management company. You guys are a full life cycle provider. And I think right now with the current political conversations going on and carving out BTR, you guys have moved, not moved, but talk to me about your portfolio mix. What are you guys seeing in reference to build to rent versus scattered? Because back in the day, a lot of your experience was around scattered because that was a big part of the approach to what was happening. And, regardless of what the current administration is saying, I think the industry had already discovered, hey, BTR is really a better solution for everyone involved. It does add supply and overcome affordability from windshield time and, all the things it takes to maintain properties. BTR tends to math better long term from a NOI standpoint. Let's dive into that a little bit. Let's get inside that because you've been on both sides of the fence. You've managed huge acquisitions, billions of dollars of acquisitions on the scattered lot side, and now you are extremely experienced in the letter B, billions on the BTR side. So I love that combination of experience. So it's easy to say your experience, but you have a combination. You've seen both. That's a big deal.
Totally. Great segue because, we consider ourselves fortunate to have the background and the discipline that we were forced to, hone managing SFR. It's hard. There's a reason why it took until, the financial crisis to acquire and cobble together large portfolios of single family assets. As everybody knows who's likely watching this, it was because, it was hard. The barrier to entry was cost. If nobody knew how well you could operate geographically decentralized assets all over the place, one over here, one over there, and then another across the country without having all, your assets, meaning your capital, like on site, close so that you could utilize them. It was long believed that it was just going to cost you too much money. The financial crisis allowed prices to drop to a level where it almost didn't matter if that was true and what couldn't be done. You're still going to be able to exit in 5 years when values go back up. So worst case, you lose a little bit of cash flow and then you exit with a big win after you cobbled all these things together. Now, as we know and history has told us, you can do this at a positive return, and and this never-ending search for operational efficiency that increases those returns is ongoing.
Yep.
So we were forced to utilize tactics and strategies to make sure we took a look. Like, I love to use swim lanes, right? Like, let's make process, swim lanes, who's responsible for what, turn process, swim lanes, leasing, everything, right? We were fortunate enough to step back and look at the process and say, okay, as we've now gone into BTR and even multifamily, which we're leaning into as well, what can we take from the SFR model of everything's got to be done centrally, with the exception of the person who walks in the door to, turn a home or to perform a work order? Maybe you have a leasing agent on the ground, but at the end of the day, what do you have to do in the market or on site? And let's be bullish. Let's get crazy. What can we do remotely and not only not degrade the NOI or the performance of the asset, but potentially improve it? Right? Because if we can do these things for a BTR community or multifamily community, which we are doing, at a cheaper cost than, as we know, the traditional BTR model kind of has come from multifamily, and it's like, put everything on site, isolate them, they work only on your stuff. And what does that create? Typically, not everywhere, but typically it invites waste, right? You don't have enough work to do for everybody. It would be better if you could share them across multiple assets. So we've identified, and in some cases, the on-site crew that they would have today at BTR site might be 6, might be 8 people. You chop that in half, right? Because you're doing, you got a centralized leasing function that does some of the leasing process in a remote location or central RENU location, and you have your folks on site to be there for in-person, tours and walk-ins and all that good stuff. Maintenance. Most sites and the multifamily model, for good reason, would have, your maintenance manager and then your maintenance tech all on site. Maintenance need to be on site, right? Maintenance manager can be sitting anywhere, see the work order come in, dispatch it appropriately, do some trial.
Multiple properties.
Absolutely. Same thing around renewals. Renewals is not an in-person function, right? So that can get sent out from everywhere and communicated from anywhere. Collections, right? I don't know many places that are still collecting cash. And we've had several that we've taken over where we've changed that policy. People don't, it's not there's a tiny month or two of retraining the resident, but at the end of the day, it's all online payments now. So as I am out pulling the process apart, being absolute psychos about pulling the process apart, measuring every single step, and understanding what does and doesn't have to happen, and how can you eliminate waste? Because when you eliminate waste, your client or your customer or the owner of the property wins. When they win, you can pass through savings and all that good stuff, and it allows the property manager the pathway to serve the resident the best way they possibly can. How do we have more information? What you have to do to execute a central process, right? Is you have to have a good workflow management system. You have to have good data. You have to have good triggers. You have to have exception reports and task bars telling people what they have to do and blinking in red all the way up to me in some cases. Hey, this turnover is going way too long. Step into that.
Being here.
Don't wait to make a phone call to the person on site, right? So what that does, now that obviously helps with execution, but the other ancillary benefit that gets overlooked, I think, sometimes is you learn. You learn about what's working and what isn't. I mean, at RENU, we manage or we measure 7 different stages of the turn.
Right?
As a KPI, right? Because we want to understand how long does it take from move out to get on site and do the move out inspection? How long does it take from that inspection to the creation of a scope of work? How long does it take to get that scope of work approved internally? How long does it take the internal approval approved by the client if they need it? How long does it take to get the approval to the job start to job finish to an in-person QC or quality control check? Then from QC to punch list, and ultimately the home is rent ready and ready to go. All of that could happen in 7 days if there's 7 different stages to measure. Now, if one of those stages goes long and you've got a system that shows you what's happening and calls out outliers, it is very hard to waste additional days not knowing what's happening, right? So this is how we've approached things at RENU, and, just completely pulling everything apart to its lowest common denominator and all these strands, understanding where the bodies are buried, where the inefficiencies are, and then attacking them with ferocity and not, unrelenting focus on those little things, repetition every day. And when you add all that up over time, atomic habits, you get a beautiful symphony of performance that ultimately leads in NOI uptick. So not only do you have the centralized model where there's some obvious cost savings to the client, where you have less overhead, you're not being charged back for a computer system or phones or any of that stuff, because we've got a central platform that was built before. We didn't create this for them. This has been there. So all these costs are baked in, and it allows us to be able to pass that through.
So I also think there's a big portion of what I learned in scaling, the past company I led, was identifying on your team too. So when you say you centralize tasks or behaviors or things that had to happen with workflows within the business, from a localized, happening at each property, and you centralize that, all of a sudden, let's take a leasing agent, for example. Let's talk about what a leasing agent looks like. They're on site because you want to greet a potential new resident, and you want that new resident to have an experience. That skill set of a leasing agent, they're people. They do very well in environments. They're salespeople, essentially, right? So, and they care about their community. Their job is to nurture the community and welcome a new resident, and then nurture that relationship while that resident lives there. And it becomes a face that the resident is very familiar with seeing. And every time they see that face, they leave feeling some sort of way every time they interact with someone, on that property. Well, that's a big deal, because not all leasing agents are really good at the other stuff that leasing agents and property managers were being asked to do. Collections. That's not what biz dev people do. It's not their skill set, and they're just not great at it. They'll do it, and they'll do it well, and there's some that can. However, if you free up certain people from not doing tasks that they're not really great at, and you centralize it with people who are really good at it, it's a missed opportunity, huge missed opportunity, and will impact a bottom line millions of dollars. And you don't realize the scale of just having the wrong tasks with the wrong skill sets, with natural skill sets of people. And then the compounding factor is they're freed up to do more of what they're really good at. And a leasing agent focus on the things they're good at, and that's attracting and closing leases. Bam. You have a decentralized NOI engine, is what I call that, right? So for some, I love your approach to that, because centralization, when I first experienced it, it was uncomfortable from the vendor side, going through the process of when you were at AMH and First Key, we were a vendor. And when centralization started, we were a vendor of Invitation Homes as well. So that meant all of a sudden, all the relationships that I had built locally or my team had built locally to get a work awarded was like, oh gosh, now they're centralizing this. Now we got to get with corporate. Now we got to figure out who's awarding the work. Why did our work go down here? And at first we pivoted and we were a little concerned because we were like, oh, we're losing work. But it wasn't. Long term, we didn't lose work. During a short term movement, it was more about we didn't long term lose the work because we were actually able to scale better as well. Forecasting. There was no forecasting at the beginning stages. I was like, can we get a forecast? Like, how many houses are you going to buy this month? And they'd be like,
As many as possible is usually the answer, right?
yeah, as many as possible. And be like, okay, well, I'll let Mohawk know, just keep making LVP. So, it was those learning curves, but now today we've got the data. And centralization is just compounding the data. Not only do we have data, but we got compounded data. And then we've got compounded workflows. And that's, if you recognize it, because not everyone has, or they don't have the technology. How's technology playing into this for you guys? What's your look like?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, a couple of things I really quickly want to double click on what you said.
Or
It was really, you make such a great point about first the leasing team, right? Or, what our model, and again, multifamily models, every BTR or multifamily site is different. Truly. You can't, just like you can't slap a multifamily model in, you can't slap a RENU model in without some customization, understanding the market around you, the actual pluses, strengths, and weaknesses of the asset. So
graphics, community, all the, geographics, all the things.
I think what I love about RENU the most and what we offer these owners is that we have the tech stack and the widget in terms of our platform and workflows to be able to easily shift pieces around the module based on that specifics. This isn't like, hey, here's how we do things and here's what we're offering and there you go.
Take your circle and try to cram it into our square.
Correct. We do not, right? Because what we want to do is, we want to identify that I don't need anybody on site other than 3 leasing killers. They just need to lease, right? And then we need to find the best leasing agents. Now, this is why people are still a huge part of this. Systems and platforms, they're all great and a must have, but it's only 2 of the 3 legs of the stool, right? Without that third leg and good people, the stool falls over. So you still have to have good people, but it allows you, I think it helps you as an owner or as an operator to, have more clear expectations of what that role looks like. To your point, a leasing agent who is, I don't need them to be great collectors. I don't need them to do renewals. I don't need them to, to deal with maintenance at all. Zero, right? So that doesn't mean you're going to win on every single leasing agent you hire, but it certainly, I would think, and we've seen it decreases the margin for error because you know what you're hiring for, you know what they're responsible for, and then you go get them, right? So I think you made a great point there. I just wanted to kind of double click.
Yeah, the people side of it matter. And it's not always a comfortable movement either because, and I think we see this with AI where certain tasks are coming off of people and are now being handled by some, maybe not even AI, but automation. There's fear that like, oh, you're taking responsibility for me. So we have to teach our people too. We have to paint vision and we have to explain and be transparent about why we're decentralizing, or why the importance of not decentralizing, centralizing. And the people, this is always going to be a people business, always, because these are people's homes. We're talking about residents. So yes, let's leverage technology and automation and centralization, but there are moments where it does make sense where, we're just reallocating those times and the effort to the things that they're better at. That's it compounds in that atomic habit of, underestimating what we can do over time with consistency. That is centralization.
Yes.
Really, and identifying that.
And you made the second point I think you made, which was so good, which is when you said you centralized and that initially got a little slower and was clunkier. Some people never get out of that, right? They try to centralize. And when you go from a decentralized system to a centralized system, it's not that, it sounds easy, but it's not that easy. And that's why a lot of folks, this isn't a brand new concept. A lot of the big groups that are doing property are trying to do this. And with varying degrees of success, it's because your tech stack has to change, your processes and systems have to change, the culture has to change. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. So, I think where we benefit is that we were built on that structure, and we have to really change anything. We have the pieces to move around to customize specifically for what's needed at a site or a current owner. And I think where I think we benefit the most is the ability to say, okay, look, we've got some, enterprise software, like we're on AppFolio, right? And we use, Snowflake as a data warehouse tool that joins everything together. And then we've got several workflow management systems, largely customized and built in-house that like the term process I just talked about. That's a full-on customized process that we built in-house and continue to iterate on. What this allows us to do is, if we don't have an existing sub process that matches the need of a site or an owner's request, we have the ability to take a look and attempt to recraft it or, branch off of the normal workflow for this particular owner and accomplish what we're looking to accomplish or what they're looking to accomplish. Now, sometime, like any good operator that's using the feedback loop and not banging their head against the wall, sometimes we get it wrong, right? So we certainly have, I should say.
Yeah, we all. Yeah, we all.
Yeah, you think that, hey, this is great. Let's centralize it. Things will go great. And like you experienced partially, sometimes things would get worse and you realize, okay, I got to scrap this. Back to the drawing board. Let's go get better at this, right? But I think because we've got a system that isolates so many workflows and
We specialize.
yeah, and then you
You start to specialize on each of the 7 stages or, the however many stages on the back end. Once it turns into a lease, you get to specialize and either your tech stack's going to be able to specialize, or just like our example with the leasing agents, they're going to specialize in their craft.
can failure easier.
And isolate and you probably faster.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Faster, and that speed is detrimental. When you lead at this level, culture doesn't just become a buzzword, right? There's a lot of buzzwords. Resident experience, I feel like, has become a buzzword. Culture and resident experience is not a buzzword at RENU Property Management. It's an operational system. And how you think about leadership, trust, and accountability across your teams, your markets, the portfolios you guys are managing, it drives impact. So talk about setting standards, empowering your teams. What does that loop look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think along the lines of what we've been chatting about, right? It's we really we think feedback is a gift, right? That is a common theme around RENU, right? Whether that comes from internal feedback or resident feedback, and sometimes most importantly, the client's feedback, the customers, the owner's feedback. So whether we're getting
we used to say accountability is a form of love.
yes, absolutely,
It's care.
yeah. And when you get feedback, again, whether it's the system telling you did this wrong, right? Your performance is suffering and here's how it's shown. Or whether it's someone, a resident telling you I had a bad experience, or a client saying I'm displeased with the service I'm getting. That is all important data and feedback that can be used to get better. So that's number one. It's creating that accountability and love and need, and not just love, but searching out for feedback. How did I do today? How can I serve you better?
Yep.
How can I be better for you?
Where did I miss?
That's a critical piece, and it's got to come from the top down, and then you'll see it go from the bottom up. And right, in some of the best ways, I like to end a lot of calls with like, "What else can I do to help you?" Right? Is there a roadblock I can remove for you? There isn't always, right? But when there is, and if somebody hasn't thought to say it, that gives them that one last opportunity.
Let's call Ryan. He's got the answer.
Or oftentimes I don't, but
Yeah.
but I can potentially help them feeling
Question.
right, yeah, or remove a roadblock, right? So I think that's one thing, and then I know I keep going back to the well of servant leadership, but there's so many good quotes I love out there, and I'll butcher them if I try to get them. But one John Maxwell has one that's like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think it's something like that, right? And I think that is humans. That's fundamental, right? it's great if you're an expert. It's great if you are the guy that came from your first key that's going to help us. But, they don't really care how much of that you know until they know that you actually care about them and their mission and their, them as people. And I think that's something that I have experienced as a young professional, and felt really like my cup was filled by some really good mentors early on that showed me that they were the smartest person in the room, but they got down to my level and said, "What do you need? What are you struggling with? How can I help you?" Those interactions over time stuck with me, and it has shaped the way I like to interact with people today. So I love to talk to people at all levels of the organization.
Same.
To residents. I'll talk to whoever will talk to me as
Actually prefer being in the trenches and being in the field. They'd be like, "Oh no, Yvonne's going out on job sites," and everyone would panic, and they'd run over to the houses and get them, looking polished and perfect. And so I'd be real quiet about going out into the field because I wanted raw. I wanted to get out in the field and see, get out with and see. I want to see the areas of opportunity. And we used to say a couple things in field operations in the flooring space at Preferred was we're going to fail our customer. Let's just go into the mindset of we're going to mess up. We're going to not show up. We're going to have vans break down. We're going to have a job from yesterday go too long into today and then not get to today's jobs. Those things are going to naturally happen. How you handle it is one thing, but build the relationship. Just stay focused on building relationship and delivering the message and allowing our customer to experience that we care. We're not okay with the truck breaking down, but we know there are things that we can't control. But I promise you, when the truck breaks down, we're going to do our best to get somebody else out there or get a truck out there, or you're going to depend on that and you're going to know that we cared so much. But build the relationship so much that when we fail, you can lean on those relationships and have a comfort level of saying, "Hey, we messed up today."
Yep.
And build those relationships at every level. And to your point, Ryan, not always at the top. It wasn't about me going to the conferences and building the relationships with, the procurement teams and the C-suite level players. It was actually more impact about the relationship getting built at the site superintendent level with my field directors, my district managers that were overseeing all markets, and then their team who was out in the field actually running job sites. Making sure that those relationships are intact are all important at every single level. And then making sure the relationships you're intact with your vendors, who's supplying you your tech stack. What are your relationships look like with your tech providers? Relationships at every level within the business, those are a lot of leaky holes. Those are a lot of hemorrhage points.
You are paid price for not treating your vendors well.
You will.
Paying them well, just when problems occur, not throwing them under the bus. I mean, it's, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're hitting on a very, very important point here, right? And it's all this culture of leadership style. I was lucky to come into this existing, right? I mean, I happen to be aligned with these thoughts, but Travis and the leadership team there had already had this in place. And Travis, on top of being one of the most intelligent individuals and intuitive individuals I've ever met, he's got a personal accountability value structure that unlike I've ever seen. I mean, he and I both, I think, try to really not just we're saying a lot of nice words here, but what the proof is in the pudding. When things go wrong,
as a result,
we try to, failures are on us, successes are on the team.
Sure,
and that happens to be true most of the time. But even when they're not,
this is actually true.
Yeah, when you see your team, but you got many leaders out there who you'll see taking personal, responsibility for the wins. And I don't know that that's anybody's, narcissistic intention, but your teams see that. They feel it. Your vendors, they feel it and see it. I think it's so important to be intentional around propping your teams up and, putting them in and making it clear that you were standing on their shoulders right now. When failures occur, saying, "Hey, I didn't set the right clarity. I didn't give you enough tools. I didn't remove enough roadblocks.
Whatever it was.
Matters. That matters a great deal.
Great deal. So we've come to my favorite round of Inside the Vendor Network, the lightning round. You and I think there's a handful of shows that I always go over. I had a feeling you and I were Northerners. I'm from upstate New York, so we tend to talk and we could keep talking. But lightning round is toward the end of the episode. It's my favorite part, and it's fast, quick, rapid fire questions that I'm going to ask you. So all right, Ryan, lightning round. First thing that comes to mind, most underrated driver of NOI.
I think I would say there's so many good answers here, but I would say waste with vacant days. It's why we measure the turns like we do and why we are psychotic about finding where those vacant days are and those wasted handoffs from central to local to vendor to local to central. Eliminate the waste.
Eliminate it. One mistake that cost operators the most money. It's kind of twice the same question, I think.
Yeah, and it's a similar answer. I think it's letting inefficiencies that you're able to identify go unchecked, and they compound.
They keep happening.
Yep. So I think it's go to the point of friction as fast as possible.
Biggest misconception about centralized operations.
It's easy to do. I think it is not easy to do. It is a very difficult thing. Again, we are lucky that we've got a head start coming from the SFR side, but I think as many operators are finding out, trying to go central it takes time, it takes practice, it takes trial and error.
Best advice you've ever received.
Ooh, I'm gonna break the rule and give you two.
Okay.
Early mentor told me to listen more. And I felt like I had so much to say and I was so excited and that enthusiasm would carry the day. It doesn't always. Listen more is a very good piece of advice that I still struck with today. And I think that another one, this was actually a Travis-ism when I first came on. And he said, when you are building this out, I want you to build a system that is so good that even average execution wins. And that stuck with me. We can be, because you can't control everything. What you control is the system, and it's so good that even average execution wins. Think about if we actually execute in an excellent way.
Right?
So,
I love that.
Yeah.
What keeps you grounded outside of work? What do you do to keep yourself grounded? Re-energized, because you're definitely a high empath. You're a people person. You get your energy around people, but that's draining. What keeps you grounded? How do you re-energize?
It's easy. The easiest question on here. That's my family.
Yeah.
My wife, and just being with them, and realizing that time is our greatest asset, and it's ever dwindling. And that's it for me.
So, if an owner or developer listening today wants to learn more about RENU and how centralized operations could impact their portfolio, where should they start?
Yeah, I think the easiest answer is to give me a shout. I do free consults all the time. My team does. I think we can give some pretty quick and easy checklist questions that even if they didn't want to answer me on the phone, they could scribble down and go look into it themselves and say, that guy may have a point, right? And of inefficiencies that they might be seeing. The ideal scenario, and where we've had a lot of success in several of the portfolios and sites we've taken on today, started with me saying, hey, here are the things that we kind of go through to see if our model can actually have that 20% impact that we like to talk about. It doesn't happen for everybody, right? But more times than not, if you take that kind of a call, you've got some improvements that we can make very, very quickly. The next step to that is let's sign an NDA and send me your trailing 12, P&L statement. And line by line, I would look through and say, okay, here's how we would treat this. Here's how we would do that. Here's what our pricing structure costs here. Here's how many people I'd have on this site. Here's how I'd underwrite your rents, everything all the way through. And we've had great success with not only those conversations, but once submitted, being accountable to that very first analysis we did and say, this is what we're going to see. And if we don't, you have my permission to raise hell. This is, so I think, take a look at your platform, try to scrutinize your own financial statements and understand where you think you might not be sure why is this where it is? And if you're up for it, give me a call. I'll talk you through some of those particular points and potentially even do a side-by-side for you.
Sure. And I think access, right? So I think access is what's always key. Um, Letting the audience know today that they have access to the data and the experience that you possess and that RENU Property Management possess. And they could take it as far as signing an NDA, share their trailing 12, and you'll unpackage it for them and point to some things, and they could walk away and say, okay, I'm going to go try it on my own. And if I fail, I can always come back and let y'all, walk me through it. You can go that deep. Or you could simply, I know on your website, you've got some content and some white papers and articles out there too, where there's information and some high level best practices that, kind of do the sniff test for the dead bodies. And you're on LinkedIn, you guys have a website. It'll be in the comments down below. So thank you so much for being here today, sharing your experience and your perspective. Conversations like this is what helps bring clarity to how this industry actually was created, where RENU and other organizations have come from, why RENU is one of the leaders in this space, and why I invited you on the show today. So Palisade is thankful for you, and we are thankful for their sponsorship with their shower tile systems, improving how wall panel systems are built, speed in install, and long-term performance. So thank you again today to Palisade Shower Systems. And for everyone watching and listening, go ahead and subscribe now if you haven't already, especially in light of what's going on. Narratives like this, talking about the fact that there are many organizations out there today, absolutely not a buzzword, resident experience, providing a good resident experience, committed to adding supply responsibly in this industry, impacting affordability, and people with experience that understand how the real estate industry works, starting at brokerage, going through owner operator, large portfolio managers, ending up at RENU, and now leading one of the leaders in property management in this space. Subscribe, coming on board. So thank you for following Inside the Vendor Network. We exist to highlight the real people doing the work, operators, vendors, field leaders, and ultimately the residents we serve. I am your host, Yvonne Kenny, and we'll see you next time on Inside the Vendor Network. Thank you again, Ryan, for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes.